Broadcasting live from Peacock Alley this evening. This is Gary Emineth running the controls with your host, Dale Wetzel. We got a busy night ahead of us, Dale. But
we do. We have three distinguished gentlemen with us. We're going to be talking about the issues of the day. And, Gary, first of all, what sort of culinary delights do we have at the Peacock Alley this evening?
Well, tonight is political wing night, so we have left wings and right wings, and there's a difference between the left and the right wings. I'm a right winger, and I'm sitting next to Eric here on the table, and we'll get to him a little bit later in the segment.
I understand that Eric is quite the left winger.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm sitting to his right, so we'll kind of, at least where I'm sitting anyway. But the difference between the left wings and the right wing is the left wings are breaded, so they're $5 tonight at Peacock Alley for 10 of them. I've already had 18 of them. I've had barbecue, salt and vinegar, and let me think, what's the other one? Barbecue, salt and vinegar.
How about Thai? Do you have any Thai peanut?
No, I didn't have Thai peanut. Oh, I had the regular spicy buffalo one, so that's what I had.
Okay, let's talk about this for a moment. Is Thai peanut a left wing or a right wing sauce?
I would make it a left wing.
Why is that?
Because from Thailand. I don't think they're very conservative. Well, they tend to be on the left side. So
because they're foreigners, so it's a left wing sauce. Okay.
Yeah, but the sauce is not what makes it. It's the breading. So.
But is it conservative to bread your chicken wings or to leave them naked?
I like them naked, and I'm a right winger, so that falls in line with my right wing little menu here.
Well, see, I think that you're wrong. I mean, I think that conservatives should bread their chicken.
And why would that be?
Because it has more cholesterol that way. I would think, and it has more calories too. Well, these are good, solid right wing values. I would think, wouldn't they be?
Well, I think less is more, and that's what a conservative is, and that's why I wouldn't put
maybe they're libertarian wings.
That could be.
The naked ones? Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, tonight at Peacock Alley, where we're broadcasting live tonight, political wing night, 10 wings for $5. Come and eat all you want, and we're going to have a fun show tonight. And, Dale, you've been busy at the legislature today. Maybe you can give us a little bit of what happened today.
You know, the gentlemen at the table, I think they've witnessed a great deal of this, and it's quite interesting. First of all, let's talk about the Conservation Fund. Kelvin Hullet, who's with us tonight. First of all, let's introduce our guests because I'm going to be referring to them in my opening little spiel here. We have Kelvin Hullet, who's the president of the Bismarck-Mandan Chamber of Commerce. We have Mr. John Godfread, who is a vice president at the Greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce. And we have Eric Aasmundstad, who is the former president of the North Dakota Farm Bureau, and still quite active in public affairs. And he was running around the Capitol today because there are lots of things he was interested in. And one of them was what's called a conservation fund. And this is something that Kelvin Hullet helped put together in the wake of a failed initiated measure last year. The group of conservation organizations drafted a initiated measure to essentially set aside a portion of the oil tax for a conservation fund, which would have been run by a 9-member appointed board. And this initiated measure didn't get off the ground because the organizers had the poor fortune or poor judgment to use a group of NDSU football players as their signature gatherers, and these young fellas didn't have the finer points of gathering signatures down, and so they were doing things like
that's putting it like
they were doing things like copying them out of phone books.
Yeah, it's called the white pages.
They were making up names, and eventually they were found out, and the petitions were disallowed, and the whole initiated measure essentially went down the tubes. Well, this was taken as an opportunity by some folks who thought, well, since this might even come up again, we might as well try to moderate it a bit, perhaps. And so the Bismarck-Mandan Chamber was one of the organizations that essentially got all of the folks together who were interested in this, including the North Dakota Farm Bureau, the Greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce, the other conservation organizations like Ducks Unlimited, and they all were meeting regularly since September to kind of hash out legislation which has been introduced, and it was included in the governor's budget message. And this bill would have a $30 million conservation fund. The original initiated measure, the amount of money that would have been controlled by this appointed board could have been $160 million per 2 years, or even greater than that, because it was linked to oil tax revenue. whereas the bill that was heard today by the House Natural Resources Committee, it's a fixed amount over 2 years, $30 million. And it would be, there would be recommendations made by an advisory board, which has a number of stakeholders as members. But the final decision on grants and how the money is spent goes to the State Industrial Commission, which is made up of the governor, Jack Dalrymple, the Attorney General, Wayne Stengham, and the Agriculture Commissioner, Doug Goehring. Now this is, it's thought to be a much better setup than the initiated measure because there's some political accountability there. You have elected officials who are calling the shots. And what was surprising about the hearing today is the gentleman for Ducks Unlimited, who was the leader of the initiated measure that did not go on the ballot. His name is Steve Adair. He came in and said, well, $30 million is nice over 2 years, but what we really want is $200 million. And so the folks on the Natural Resources Committee were a bit slack-jawed, I think, at that sort of number. And we'll see just how successful they are at wheedling that much of the green stuff out of the legislature.
Was the guy from Ducks Limited, what was his name again?
Steve Adair.
Was he from Nebraska? I was wondering if he's a hog farmer.
I
just has a
come on. I mean, the Ducks Unlimited does have a very nice building down by the Missouri River,
very
so
nice.
I think that they're not hurting for cash. But I was thinking 200 million green ones is a lot of spread. Yep. That's a lot of green. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of success they have at trying to bump up that $30 million number. I personally am not too optimistic they'll get anything close to $200 million, but we shall see. Our guests here are Senator David O'Connell from Lansford. He was just reelected last year, and he's been in the House and the Senate. He is a former Democratic Senate leader, and he is a member of the Appropriations Committee. And he is a co-sponsor of the bill that we'll be talking about. It's everyone refers to it as the Animal Cruelty Bill. It's actually the Anti-Animal Cruelty Bill. And we have the Agriculture Commissioner, Republican, Doug Goehring, and he helped to write the Anti-Cruelty Bill. And we have Representative Cory Mock from Grand Forks, a Democrat. He was intimately involved, I think it's fair to say, in the writing of an anti-cruelty bill 2 years ago. And the bill has not been in the House yet, but he's very familiar with the subject. I thought he would add a bit of perspective to our discussion. First of all, Mr. Goehring, how does this bill change the law as we have it now?
Well, first of all, it does now employ a Class C felony when you have an act of cruelty towards an animal, which did not exist before. Before, we were operating with a Class A misdemeanor. So in those egregious acts, it actually does step up and implement a Class C felony, or as a court or a judge would see fit, you could be charged with a Class C felony based on the act. And I think what it really does is what the group has really worked on is they've adjusted the penalty to really reflect the severity of the crime.
And a Class C felony is 5 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. That's the maximum penalty.
Or both.
Yes.
Or both, yeah.
Senator O'Connell, you're from a rural district. Was this tough for you to sign on to? Because I imagine that maybe a lot of the farmer constituents might think there's not a lot of upside to this.
No, you're definitely right there. It's going to be a little heat no matter which way this one goes. But when I was out campaigning up on a little over 24,000 miles, and being there's a flood in every one of the three counties represented, there was a number of animals that were abandoned. You know, the shelters were full, and in Minot, and you know, people, when they see an abandoned animal, a dog, cat out on the farm, especially if you got little ones, you get pretty, you don't know if they got a disease or what. So a lot of these animals die of poison, lead poison. So, you know, looking at it, I talked with the commissioner, and the commissioner, has spent almost 2 years, if I remember right. Almost three, putting this together. And after visiting with him, and he had all these groups put together, Dale. I don't know how in the devil he did it. When you get every farm group and every organization going, that's a compliment in itself. I've only heard one complaint, and that's on the felony charge on cruelty or abandonment so far. And that's unbelievable. You probably got a better heads up on what went on today than I do, because I testified. I went back and I tried to get in the hall even, and I couldn't even get close enough to hear what was going on, so I know you were in there. But before we get too serious, did you hear about the 2 silkworms that were in a race today?
No, I didn't hear about that. Could you tell me about that, please?
They ended up in a tie.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so.
See, I think it was Corey Moxtad.
Maybe Corey. That's not what Corey was the commissioner.
The very loud and obnoxious yellow tie.
Oh, it's not loud or nor obnoxious.
It looks great. It looks good. Blue. I like it. Matches your sunflower.
Representative Mock, how did you get involved in this issue? You were quite involved in it 2 years ago.
Well, in part, and I actually have to give tremendous accolades to the commissioner's office and Commissioner Goehring and had many of his staff, as Senator O'Connell had pointed out. This was a group of ag producers and those who had a vested interest in seeing animals cared for, that's had to really wanted to have this law reworked in a way that clearly defined acts of cruelty and clearly said in statute what it meant to violate those statutes and the appropriate punishment for those. So for us, 2 years ago, I came in with the Commissioner's Office, Farm Bureau, Farmers Union, Stockmen's Association, the veterinarians, and then you even have those who work with the animal shelters. And my connection is a volunteer in our local shelter up in Grand Forks. We just adopted a puppy about 3 months ago, and it's that's always exciting when you have a new little, in our case, a terrorist keeping us up at night is sort of how we look at her for these next couple of months.
I understand she's tearing up your house right now.
She is. In fact, I hate to make light of such a serious subject, but you talk about animal cruelty. She's being cruel to us right now. It's I just saw the photo of the thing she's tearing up in our living room. But no, I worked on this issue 2 years ago because of the importance. And many constituents of mine, I live in a very urban area. Unlike Senator O'Connell, who put 24,000 miles on his car campaigning for a legislative race, I bet I walked 24,000 steps going door to door just in my contiguous district. So it's a big difference. We get a lot of the media from Minnesota and South Dakota, and we had heard a lot of stories of acts of cruelty. And the stories would come out in our newspapers and television and radio saying if that had happened in North Dakota, they would have walked away with virtually no penalty. And the one case that really brings to mind is the case where a cat was superglued to the side of a highway, all 4 paws and its nose, and it was left there to die. And someone recovered, and the cat lived. But you think of that, and you go, in North Dakota, that would have been, at worst, a misdemeanor. And that could have happened 3 or 4 times over and still would have been, at worst, a misdemeanor. So that really was, a few phone calls and some concerned visits with constituents. And I had no choice but to want to get involved and help the cause as much as I can.
And we did hear, too, some cases where abuse where couples were breaking up, and I'm going to get even with you, so all of a sudden the family pet or the girlfriend's pet is beaten or whatever. So we don't hear about that much in North Dakota, but in other states, you hear more of that all the time.
Dale, I appreciate the accolades and the recognition, and I certainly thank people for that, but I really have to commend the group that got together, the North Dakotans for Responsible Animal Care. It consisted of the North Dakota Stockmen's, North Dakota Farmers Union, North Dakota Farm Bureau, the Dakota Zoo. There was the Humane Societies, the local Humane Societies, pet shelters that were involved, and Dakota Zoo, the North Dakota Veterinary and Medical Association, my state vets, the Board of Animal Health, that really did a lot of work. They carried the water. They came to a consensus. They had a goal in mind, and they worked on that. And I commend them. I respect them because when they got together, they were sensitive to the issue, and they really stayed focused on the ball. That doesn't mean to say that at times they digressed a bit, but you know what? That conversation was good because it brought out, again, those sensitivities that they were trying to deal with, and they did a very good job of drafting and bringing something together that first split off and looked at neglect, that looked at abandonment, and it looked at cruelty, and I treated them differently. And I think that was so important. I just played a role for a time in being a facilitator, and I know that Jason Schmidt ended up being the chairman of the group and followed through very well. They did a great job. They got out there and informed the public of what their intentions were. I support that wholeheartedly, and I appreciate all their hard work. I really can't say enough about all the good work and hard work they did, and they came together to really take on an issue that I know has been near and dear to many in North Dakota, but certainly was an issue, and it was a concern that was raised, and they've done a great job.
Gentlemen, I guess the first question is, how is the soybean business in North Dakota? How is it to be a soybean grower these days?
It's good right now. Our industry is growing every year. Acres are up. Last year we had good yields, so the production is up. Things are good for North Dakota soybeans.
Territory is also expanding a lot. Beans are going west. They used to be in the southeast part of the state, and they've really come west. From the east, so that's why I can say that. And they've moved north a lot, too. They're all the way up the Canadian border, and a lot of people have a lot of success with them.
That was another one of my questions. Where do people grow soybeans in North Dakota, and how has the soybean growing territory changed over, say, the last 10 years?
I would say the soybeans are growing all the way out to Bismarck, up through Minot, and everywhere east from there. That's kind of the prime area. I don't know how much they grow them on the west side of the Missouri, but I'm sure there's some there. But, 10 years ago, my area in Steele County wasn't really a soybean growing area. It was still south and east of there yet, and I consider myself to be kind of in the southern, eastern part of the state. It's really expanded.
I'm Richland County, which is southeast, and we've had soybeans for a long time. As long as I've been around, we've had soybeans, so it's always been there for our county. So it's interesting to see all these people that have never raised them before in other parts of the state and talk to them, and they're having success with them, and they're doing well.
What caused people to start growing them where they haven't been grown before?
What happened in my area was we were growing wheat, barley, and sunflowers. And we had a terrible time with disease and sunflowers, a terrible time with blackbirds, and we just got fed up with it. You'd get a nice crop, get to harvest, and half of it's on the ground due to the birds or the head rot. And we had enough, started trying soybeans, and we've had good yields with them. And they're an easy crop to grow.
Do blackbirds not like soybeans?
They do not.
Well, that's
geese love them, though.
Okay.
The geese love them.
What do you do about that?
Depends on who you ask.
Well, I don't want you divulging any trade secrets here.
There's not really a lot you can do if you have a goose problem in your field. They can come in off a waterway, and they'll do a lot of damage in a short time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you try to deal with it? Do you try to scare them, or what options are open to you?
Not a lot, really. Not a lot.
They take over their areas. And
Dale, there's been a continuing research effort done within the soybean community to change or deal with different varieties. But if you go up around the Devil's Lake area, what I hear up there, the biggest reason that they are able to grow soybeans is they have rock packers. They can push the rocks back down the ground so they don't pick them up with a combine on their way by.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. What is it that soybeans are used for primarily?
I would say the primary use of them would be animal feed and oil. A lot of soybean oil gets processed.
What's the soybean oil used for?
Oh, it's used to make all sorts of things. It's used for cooking. It's used to make products like John Deere combines have some plastic made from soy oil. Ford Mustang seats have soy oil in them. It's used for all sorts of industrial purposes, I guess.
How significant is that? I guess I'd call it the non-food market. I mean, making plastics from soybeans or ink. How significant is that as a market?
I would say it's the market. The food grade industry in the state is robust, but other states don't have quite as much of that. So most of the soybeans go into industrial uses or animal feed. In our state, it's probably only 5 to 10% actually is used for human consumption.
What would you like to see done in the soybean industry that isn't available to you now? For example, is there a lot of processing capacity for soybeans in North Dakota?
What I would really like to see is a biodiesel plant go into North Dakota. But the problem we have with that is the animal agriculture industry in the state isn't as strong as it is other places. Where to have a successful biodiesel plant, you really need to have animals that you can feed the soy meal to in a relatively close distance. And that's been the biggest drawback for us, is to scale up a plant to process biodiesel and then have enough animals there to use the meal. It's been very difficult.
What's the advantage of using biodiesel?
I don't know if I'm the biodiesel expert.
Do you use it yourself?
Yes, if we can.
Okay.
Not every opportunity can, but we try to.
Is it tough to get?
It can be. If, let's say, I'm just driving to town, you got to look for certain gas stations or fuel stations that have it. Not everybody carries it. You know, there's a select few. And as of ag, our fuel supplier for our ag equipment, that's pretty standard to have it. So it's getting better, but a lot of the ag communities are trying to push it, and ag groups are trying to push it. Similar to ethanol, I'd say. It's there, but you just got to know where it's at.
To add to what Craig said, biodiesel is much easier to get if you have your own on-farm storage tank.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it in a tanker from your supplier much easier than you can find a filling station in town that has it. A lot of filling stations have been scared of it, to be honest with you, because they're afraid of the gelling issues. And there's people out there that just won't use it because they're scared of it.
Where does your competition come from in terms of, you mentioned how the production is exported. Who are the competing soybean growers in terms of what other countries, what other states?
South America is always going to be a major factor. If they get a good crop, it directly impacts us. Where if they can oversupply the world, the price is going to take a hit. As far as other states, just about any state is in direct competition with us for export.
And you mentioned that that the beans a lot of the beans are shipped to the West Coast for export to Asian markets. Do you have any particular country that has more of a market share than others, or is a better customer?
That's a good question. I really don't know which country would be the highest. We have a pretty good customer base over there in a number of countries.
And food-grade soybeans, I imagine, are more in demand in Asia than they are here?
Yes.
Is that a correct assumption?
Yep.
Okay. What is the extent of the soybean research program at NDSU? Do they, frankly, when I hear about research at NDSU, ag research, I hear about weed. I hear about weed and weed and weed. In terms of grains, I don't hear that much about soybeans.
Well, I think most of the commodity groups, in some size, shape, or form, are involved in their specific commodity for normal test plot things involving increased both varieties and bushels, so to speak. But they're also engaged in things like weed research, disease prevention opportunities, whether that be chemical or biologically based, and it runs a gamut. I think the last time I saw the proposals for the Soybean Council, for example, for research money, there must have been 50 different kinds of proposals, and they probably fund half of that in some size, shape, or form. The advantage to a lot of those research dollars that come out of the checkoff money, for example, they're untethered, so to speak, so that they are available for matching grants and multiplying factors and that sort of effort.
You mentioned a lot of research projects, 50 research projects. What are some of them? What do they seek to do with a soybean? What kind of research do they seek to do?
Well, for example, one of the problems that we have in the soybean community is something called cisnematose. It is a little worm, as I understand it, or it exists in the ground.
Cisnematose.
Cisnematose.
Cisnematose. Yep. Can anyone here spell that? We'll spell it later.
I'm on Wikipedia. I can help you in just a second.
It's more like a joke. I'm sorry, but it's just nematose, and it's a worm. Okay,
Mrs. Lewin, my 4th grade teacher, would be disappointed in me right at the moment.
I doubt that. I think cisminitose, it's kind of hard to, or it's kind of unfair, frankly, to say, okay, can you spell cisminitose?
2 weeks ago, I couldn't say it.
Yeah. Can you spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious?
At any rate, what that does is it attacks the root system. So what's visible above the ground can look pretty healthy. It just doesn't have any pods with beans in it.
Oh, my goodness.
So the reality is you can go most of the way through the growing season and not realize that you have the problem. Mm-hmm. It is something that has migrated from south to north into North Dakota as the soybean business expands. So
I believe Mr. Olson has successfully spelled cisminitose.
I don't know for sure yet, but that's how
he made the good college try at it. I'm sure.
He's probably as close as we're going to get.
Here's what Wikipedia says: 85% of the world's soybean crop is processed in the soybean meal and vegetable oil. Had nothing to do with your spelling, but soybeans can be broadly classified as a vegetable in a garden or field. Types, vegetable types.
But how do you spell? Come on, you're avoiding the question here. How do you spell cisminitose?
Wikipedia does not do a good job.
Don't worry about that. Gentlemen, tell me about how the Soybean Growers Association functions. You obviously have a board of directors. How do you elect your representatives to that board?
What we do is we've got a nominating committee that will go out into an area where we know we need another director or a new director, and we'll try to find somebody that has expressed an interest in working in the soybean industry. Typically what we do is we go to the Soybean Council and they keep a list of county representatives for their board, and what we'll do is we'll contact some of those county reps to see if they have an interest in serving on our board. Our board is made up of 15 individuals. We're more or less all farmers. One program that we've had a lot of success with is the DuPont Young Leader Program. That's sponsored by DuPont Pioneer, and what they do is it's a competitive process where young farmers will apply, and if they're selected, they'll go down to Johnston, Iowa for a short week of training and media training and activism, those types of things. And then the second part of it is always held in conjunction with the Commodity Classic, which is our national organization annual meeting, and they'll go through more intense training at that point. And then once they complete their training, we bring them onto our board for a year with the hope that they'll continue on and be an advocate for us.
And what is this training about? Mr. Olson, what kind of training did you get?
Well, actually, I never did do it. Jason actually has been on it, so.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, what kind of, Mr. Mewes, what kind of training are we talking about? Because I have this vision of you doing push-ups.
Oh, no, nothing like that. It's been a little while since I went through it, but what they focus on is understanding your personality, understanding your neighbor's personality, and how you need to work those together to actively work together. And then another thing they really focus on is media training, where I never knew it at that time that I'd be sitting here 5 years later talking to you, but that program helped me along getting to this point.
Well, that's great. We've been speaking this evening to Mr. Craig Olson, who's a board member of the North Dakota Soybean Growers Association, and the board president, who is the gentleman you just heard speaking. His name is Jason Mewes. He's from Colgate. Mr. Olson is from Colfax in Richland County. And we have Mr. Scott Rising, the legislative director of the North Dakota Soybean Growers Association. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. It's been very informative. I've learned a lot about soybeans.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you.
We want to thank the North Dakota Soybean Growers Association for sponsoring this segment this evening. It's been a very informative segment. And we'll be back here next Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m., and Saturday, 10 to noon on KFYR. Listen to the Legislative Report with your host, Dale Wetzel. This is Gary Ameneth, filling in for Scott Hannon.